I thought I knew my wife after 15 years of marriage. I was dead wrong. When she and her mother took a girls' trip, I never imagined what I'd discover when they returned. This is the story of the most twisted family betrayal you've ever heard. My name is Dennis Holbrook. I'm 40 years old, and I've been running my own butcher shop in Millfield, Ohio for the past 12 years. Built it from nothing with my bare hands and a loan that scared the living daylights out of me. Now it's the most popular meat market in 3 counties. People drive 40 miles just for my dry-aged steaks and homemade sausages. I take pride in honest work, fair prices, and treating my customers like family. I married Tanya Fuller when I was 25 and she was 20. She was the prettiest girl in town back then, with honey blonde hair and a smile that could stop traffic. Her father, Vernon, owned the local hardware store, and her mother, Marlene, worked as a secretary at the church. Good people, or so I thought. Solid, God-fearing folks who raised their daughter right. At least that's what I believed for 15 years. The first sign something was off came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the shop's back room, breaking down a side of beef, when Tanya walked in with that look on her face. You know the one. When your wife's already made up her mind about something, and she's just going through the motions of asking permission. Dennis, honey, Tanya said, leaning against the doorframe. Mom and I were thinking about taking a little trip together. I kept working, my knife moving through the meat with practiced precision. Where to? Oh, just down to Florida. You know how Mom's been stressed lately with Dad's blood pressure acting up and all. We figured some beach time would do us both good. I looked up at her then. Tanya was fidgeting with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger like she always did when she was nervous. Her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine either. How long? I asked. Just a week, maybe 10 days tops. We found this cute little resort in Clearwater. Nothing fancy, just a place to relax and catch up on some mother-daughter time. Something about the way she said it bothered me. Too casual, too rehearsed. Like she'd practiced the conversation in her head before coming to see me. When were you thinking of going? I wiped my hands on my apron, giving her my full attention. Next Monday, if that's okay with you. I know it's short notice, but the resort had a cancellation, and Mom really needs this, Dennis. She's been so worried about Dad lately. I nodded slowly. Vernon had been having some health issues. That much was true. High blood pressure, stress from running the hardware store. It made sense that Marlene would want to get away for a bit. Sure, babe. You two go ahead and have fun. I'll hold down the fort here. Tanya's face lit up with relief, and she practically bounced over to kiss my cheek. Thanks, honey. You're the best. But as she walked away, that nagging feeling in my gut just wouldn't quit. Something about this whole thing felt wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. The week Tanya and Marlene were gone past quietly enough. I kept myself busy at the shop, took on some extra custom orders, even did some maintenance I'd been putting off. But something felt different about the house. Empty in a way it had never felt before, even when Tanya traveled for work. They came back on a Sunday afternoon, and that's when I knew for certain something was wrong. I was in the garage, sharpening my knives, when I heard Vernon's truck pull into the driveway. Through the window, I watched him help unload luggage while Tanya and Marlene stood by the truck, whispering to each other like conspirators. Both women looked tan, relaxed, but there was something in their body language that set off alarm bells in my head. Hey there, stranger, Tanya said when she finally came inside, but her smile seemed forced. How was Florida? I asked, wrapping her in what should have been a welcome home hug. She felt stiff in my arms, like she was enduring it rather than enjoying it. Oh, it was wonderful, she said, pulling away quickly. The beach was gorgeous, and Mom got some color back in her cheeks. Marlene appeared in the doorway, looking nervous. Dennis, honey, thank you so much for letting us have that time together. It was exactly what we needed. Glad you ladies had fun, I said, but I was watching Tanya. She was fidgeting with her purse strap, not making eye contact. That's when she dropped the bombshell. Actually, Dennis, Mom and I were thinking we should probably see a doctor tomorrow. Just to make sure we didn't pick up any bugs while we were traveling. Beach resorts can be kind of germy. I frowned. You both feeling okay? Oh, we feel fine, Marlene said quickly. Just being cautious. Better safe than sorry, right? Tanya nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. We always do this after trips. Standard procedure. That was news to me. In 15 years of marriage, I couldn't remember Tanya ever feeling the need to see a doctor after traveling. Hell, I practically had to drag her to her annual checkups. What kind of doctor? I asked. The two women exchanged a quick glance. Just our regular physician, Tanya said. Nothing fancy. Probably just blood work to make sure everything's normal. I think that's smart, Vernon said from the doorway. Can't be too careful these days. But something about his tone bothered me. Like he was reading from a script. The whole conversation felt rehearsed, artificial. Want me to come with you? I offered. Oh no, Tanya said quickly. That's not necessary. It's just routine women's health stuff. You'd be bored out of your mind, sitting in a waiting room. Marlene laughed, but it sounded hollow. You know how these appointments go, Dennis. Lots of waiting around for nothing. I nodded, but that nagging feeling in my gut was getting stronger. After they left, I found myself standing in my empty kitchen, replaying the conversation in my head. Something about this whole situation didn't add up, and I was starting to think that beach vacation wasn't what it seemed. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Call it intuition, call it paranoia, but when your gut's been right about everything from beef suppliers to business deals for 12 years, you learn to listen to it. Around noon, Vernon stopped by the shop. That was unusual. He rarely came by during business hours unless he needed something specific. Dennis, Vernon said, leaning against my counter. You mind if I ask you something man-to-man? I set down the cleaver I'd been using to portion chicken breasts. Shoot, don't you think it's odd that the girls suddenly need to see a doctor after their trip? I mean, Marlene's never been one to rush to medical appointments unless she's practically dying. So I wasn't the only one who thought something was off. Yeah, it struck me as strange too. What are you thinking? Vernon rubbed his jaw, looking uncomfortable. Hell, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being an old fool, but something about this whole trip felt different. Marlene was acting secretive before they left, and now this doctor business. You want to drive over there with me? I asked, just to make sure everything's okay. Vernon nodded grimly. I was hoping you'd say that. We drove to Dr. Brennan's clinic in Vernon's truck, both of us pretending we weren't suspicious of our own wives. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a couple of cars and Marlene's sedan. There they are, Vernon said, pointing toward the front entrance. We decided to wait in the truck, but after 20 minutes, curiosity got the better of us. We walked into the clinic and took seats in the waiting area. The receptionist barely looked up from her computer. That's when we heard it. Dr. Brennan emerged from an examination room, talking to his nurse in a voice just loud enough for us to catch. Well, considering the circumstances of conception, we'll need to run additional tests for both patients. It's not every day we see a mother and daughter in this particular situation. Vernon went rigid beside me. I felt like someone had just punched me in the chest. The nurse nodded. Should we schedule them for the same follow-up appointment? Yes, Dr. Brennan said. Given that they're both pregnant by the same man, we'll want to monitor them closely. This is definitely an unusual case. The words hit me like a freight train. Both pregnant. Same man. My hand started shaking. Vernon's face had gone completely white. He looked at me with pure horror in his eyes, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Our wives hadn't just been unfaithful. They'd been sharing the same lover. The examination room door opened, and Tanya stepped out first, followed by Marlene. Both women froze when they saw us sitting there. Dennis. Tanya's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like jelly. I think the question is, what the hell have you been doing? Marlene looked like she was about to be sick. Vernon rose from his chair, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. Both of you, Vernon said, his voice shaking. Both of you are pregnant by the same man. The silence that followed was deafening. The four of us stood in that clinic hallway like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Tanya was the first to break the silence, and when she did, it was with the kind of performance I'd seen her give before when she'd been caught in smaller lies. Dennis, this is ridiculous, Tanya said, forcing a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. You're jumping to conclusions based on what you think you heard. Marlene nodded frantically. Exactly. Doctors talk about all sorts of cases. You probably misunderstood the context. Vernon took a step toward his wife, his face red with rage. Marlene, don't you dare stand there and lie to my face. We heard every word. Dad, please, Tanya said, turning to her father with tears in her eyes. You're embarrassing us. This is a medical facility, not some place for you to make wild accusations. I watched my wife work her magic, the way she always did when backed into a corner. Deflect, deny, make the accusers feel like they were the problem. It had worked on me before, but not today. Tanya, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, look me in the eye and tell me you're not pregnant. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Vernon caught it too. Well, Vernon demanded, staring at his daughter. Of course I'm not pregnant, Tanya snapped. God, you men and your paranoia. We came here for routine checkups after traveling, nothing more. Marlene wrapped her arm around Tanya's shoulders. Honestly, you two are acting like conspiracy theorists. Next you'll be accusing us of running some kind of criminal operation. But her voice was shaking, and she couldn't look Vernon in the eye. I decided to test them. Then you won't mind if I ask Dr. Brennan directly what kind of appointments you had today. Both women went rigid. That's private medical information, Tanya said quickly. He can't tell you anything without our permission. So give him permission, Vernon said coldly. Marlene laughed nervously. This is getting out of hand. Vernon, you're being ridiculous. Am I? Vernon's voice was rising. Then prove it. March back into that office and tell Dr. Brennan he can share your test results with your husband and me. The two women exchanged a panicked glance. We don't have to prove anything to you, Tanya said, her voice getting shrill. This is harassment, and I'm not going to stand here and take it. She grabbed her purse and started toward the exit. Marlene followed close behind, both of them moving like they were fleeing a crime scene. Vernon and I stood there watching our wives run away from the truth. They're lying, Vernon said quietly. I nodded. Question is, what are we going to do about it? Vernon and I drove back to my house in silence, both of us processing what we'd witnessed. When we pulled into the driveway, Marlene's car was already there. They'd beaten us home. You ready for this? Vernon asked as we walked toward the front door. Been ready for 15 years, I replied. Just didn't know it. We found them in my kitchen, sitting at the table like they were planning their next move. When we walked in, both women looked up with defiant expressions. Dennis, Tanya said, her voice cold, I think you owe me an apology for that embarrassing scene at the clinic. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Vernon remained standing, his arms crossed. The only thing I owe you, I said calmly, is the truth. And I think it's time you gave me some. Marlene shifted uncomfortably. We already told you the truth. You misunderstood what you heard. Did we? Vernon's voice was deadly quiet, because what I heard was pretty clear. 2 pregnant women, same father. Tanya laughed, but it sounded forced. Dad, you're being ridiculous. Even if that were true, which it's not, what makes you think it has anything to do with us? I leaned forward, studying my wife's face. Because you both ran out of there like your hair was on fire. Innocent people don't run, Tanya. We left because you were embarrassing us, she shot back. Making wild accusations in a public place. Then prove us wrong. I said simply, call Dr. Brennan right now and authorize him to share your test results with me. Tanya's jaw tightened. I'm not doing that. My medical information is private, even from your husband. Especially from my husband when he's acting like a paranoid lunatic. Vernon slammed his hand on the table, making both women jump. Enough games, Marlene. Are you pregnant or not? Marlene's lower lip trembled. Vernon, please don't shout at me. Answer the question. Tanya reached over and grabbed her mother's hand. Mom, you don't have to answer anything. They can't force us to. Yes, Marlene whispered, cutting her daughter off. I'm pregnant. The kitchen went dead silent. Vernon's face drained of all color. How far along? He asked, his voice barely audible. 8 weeks, Marlene said, tears starting to flow. I turned to Tanya. Your turn. She glared at me with pure hatred. Go to hell, Dennis. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. I stood up slowly, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out my phone. Fine. I'll call Dr. Brennan myself. You can't do that, Tanya said quickly. Patient confidentiality laws don't apply when I'm asking about my own wife's medical condition. I started dialing. Wait, Tanya said, panic creeping into her voice. Just wait. I stopped dialing and looked at her. Yes, she said finally. I'm pregnant too. Vernon sank into a chair like his legs had given out. Jesus Christ, he whispered. How long have you known? I asked. Since we got back from Florida, Tanya admitted. And the father? Tanya's eyes flashed with something that might have been guilt, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. That's none of your business anymore. The admission hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Both women were pregnant, and neither one was willing to name the father. That told me everything I needed to know about what kind of man we were dealing with. None of my business. I repeated, my voice dangerously calm. My wife is carrying another man's child, and you think that's none of my business? Tanya lifted her chin defiantly. We're getting divorced anyway. What does it matter who the father is? We're getting divorced? This was news to me. When did we decide that? I decided it about 6 months ago, she said coolly. I just hadn't figured out how to tell you yet. Vernon was staring at his daughter like he'd never seen her before. Tanya, what the hell has happened to you? I grew up, Dad. I realized I wasn't happy living this boring, predictable life. Marlene reached for her daughter's hand. Sweetheart, maybe we shouldn't. Shouldn't what, Mom? Tell the truth. They already know we're pregnant. Might as well tell them the rest. I felt a chill run down my spine. What rest? Tanya smiled, and it was the cruelest expression I'd ever seen on her face. We didn't go to Florida, Dennis. We went to Las Vegas. Why? To meet someone. Someone who actually knows how to treat a woman right. Vernon's hands were shaking. Who, Marlene? Who did you meet? Marlene couldn't look at him. Someone from online. We've been talking to him for months. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Both of you? I asked. You were both talking to the same man online. Tanya nodded. He's nothing like you boring small-town men. He's sophisticated, successful, knows what he wants. And what he wanted was both of you. I said, disgust creeping into my voice. He appreciates us, Marlene said defensively. He makes us feel special. Vernon stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're both sick. This is disgusting. Don't be such a prude, Dad, Tanya said. It's the 21st century. People have different kinds of relationships now. I felt like I was looking at strangers. These weren't the women I thought I knew. What's his name? I demanded. Both women went quiet. I said, what's his name? That's not important, Tanya said. It is to me. I want to know who destroyed my marriage. Tanya laughed bitterly. Your marriage was already destroyed, Dennis. You just didn't know it yet. I leaned across the table, getting close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes that I used to find so beautiful. Give me his name, Tanya. Right now. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I saw fear in her expression. His name, she said quietly, is Marcus Webb, and he's going to take care of both of us better than either of you ever did. I wasn't about to let Marcus Webb disappear into the shadows. If he thought he could destroy 2 families and walk away clean, he had another thing coming. I'd built my business on the principle that you finish what you start, and this bastard had started a war. Give me his phone number, I told Tanya. She hugged her arms around herself defensively. Why? Because I'm going to have a conversation with him. Dennis, please don't do anything stupid, Marlene said, wringing her hands. Vernon laughed bitterly. Stupid? The stupid part was trusting you two in the first place. I pulled out my phone and opened a new contact. The number, Tanya. Now. She rattled off the digits reluctantly. I dialed immediately, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. It rang 4 times before a smooth voice answered. This is Marcus. Marcus Webb. I asked. Who's asking? Dennis Holbrook. I believe you know my wife, Tanya. There was a long pause. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Cut the bull. You got my wife pregnant. You got her mother pregnant too. Now we're going to discuss what you're going to do about it. Another pause, then a chuckle. Look, buddy, I think you got the wrong guy. I don't know anyone named Tanya. I looked at my wife, who had gone pale. Really? Because she's sitting right here, and she seems to know you pretty well. There must be some misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I interrupted, is you thinking you could use my family and walk away. Where are you right now? I don't think that's any of your business. Everything about you is my business now. You made it my business when you decided to play house with my wife and mother-in-law. Marcus's voice turned cold. I'm going to hang up now. Don't call this number again. Hang up if you want, I said. But I'm going to find you anyway. And when I do, we're going to have a face-to-face conversation about your responsibilities. The line went dead. Vernon was staring at the phone. He just denied knowing them. Tanya's face was white as a sheet. He's probably just scared. Men get scared when they're confronted. Or maybe, I said slowly, he was never planning to take responsibility in the first place. Marlene burst into tears. But he said he loved us. He said we were going to be a family. He said what you wanted to hear, Vernon said harshly. You two got played by a professional liar. I was already thinking ahead. Marcus Webb thought he could hide, but he'd underestimated what a determined man with connections could accomplish. I ran a business in a small town. I knew people, private investigators, lawyers, men who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. I'm going to track him down, I announced. Tanya grabbed my arm. Dennis, what are you planning to do? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. I'm going to make sure he takes responsibility for what he's done to all of us. Within 2 hours, I had Marcus Webb's real information. It pays to have friends in low places, and my buddy Jake, who ran a computer repair shop, had skills that went beyond fixing broken hard drives. Dennis, Jake said over the phone, your boy Marcus Webb is a piece of work. Real name is Marcus Weber, and he's got a history. What kind of history? 3 different women in 3 different states have filed paternity suits against him in the past 5 years. All of them dropped the suits when he disappeared. I felt my blood pressure rising. What else? He's currently married to a woman named Sandra Weber in Cincinnati. Been married for 8 years. Has 2 kids with her. According to her social media, she has no idea about his side activities. Vernon was listening to my side of the conversation with growing anger. When I hung up, he slammed his fist on the table. So he's a serial predator, Vernon said. And our wives fell for hook, line, and sinker. Tanya and Marlene had been sitting in stunned silence since the phone call ended. Now Tanya spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. That can't be right. Marcus told us he was single. He showed us pictures of his apartment. Probably a rental he keeps for his hunting expeditions, I said coldly. Marlene was crying again. But he seems so genuine, so caring. That's what con men do, Mom, Vernon said. They seem genuine until they get what they want. I had Marcus's real address now, his work information, even his wife's contact details. The question was what to do with it. I'm driving to Cincinnati, I announced. Dennis, no, Tanya said quickly. That's crazy. What are you going to accomplish? I'm going to make sure his wife knows what kind of man she's married to. And I'm going to make sure he understands that his actions have consequences. Vernon stood up. I'm coming with you. Dad, please, Marlene begged. Just let it go. We made mistakes, but nothing. Vernon cut her off. This man destroyed our families. He needs to face the music. Tanya was panicking now. Dennis, think about this rationally. Going to Cincinnati won't solve anything. I looked at my wife, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 15 years was sitting there more concerned about protecting her lover than dealing with the wreckage of our marriage. You're right, I said finally. Going to Cincinnati won't solve anything. But it'll sure as hell make me feel better. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Vernon was right behind me. Where are you going? Tanya called after us. To have a conversation with Sandra Weber, I said without turning around. I think she deserves to know what her husband's been up to. The drive to Cincinnati took 3 hours, and Vernon and I spent most of it in grim silence. We'd left our wives sitting in my kitchen, probably planning their next move or figuring out how to spin this disaster in their favor. Sandra Weber lived in a nice suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and knew their neighbors' names. Her house was a 2-story colonial with a minivan in the driveway and kids' toys scattered across the front yard. You sure about this? Vernon asked as we parked across the street. Dead sure. She deserves to know what kind of man she married. We walked up to the front door, and I rang the bell. A few moments later, a pretty brunette woman answered, holding a toddler on her hip. Can I help you? She asked. Mrs. Weber? My name is Dennis Holbrook. I need to talk to you about your husband, Marcus. Her smile faltered. Is Marcus in some kind of trouble? Ma'am, could we come in? This is going to take a few minutes to explain. She invited us in her living room, settling the toddler into a playpen. An older boy, maybe 7 or 8, was watching cartoons on the couch. Mrs. Weber, I began carefully. Your husband has been having affairs with my wife and her mother. The color drained from her face. That's impossible. Marcus travels for work, but he's not. He wouldn't. Vernon pulled out his phone and showed her some of the photos Jake had found online. This is your husband with our wives in Las Vegas last month. Sandra stared at the photos, her hand covering her mouth. Oh my God, that's really him. There's more, I said gently. Both women are pregnant. They claim Marcus is the father. Sandra burst into tears. The little boy on the couch looked over, concerned. Mommy? What's wrong? Nothing, sweetie. Keep watching your show. She wiped her eyes and looked at us with growing anger. How many other women? At least 3 that we know of, probably more. He's done this before. That bastard, she whispered. I'm 8 months pregnant with his 3rd child, and he's out there starting other families. Vernon leaned forward. Mrs. Weber, we're going to the police about this. Marcus needs to face consequences for what he's done. Good, she said firmly. I'll testify against him. I'll do whatever it takes. We spent another hour with Sandra, sharing information and coordinating our next steps. When we finally left, she was already calling her divorce attorney. The drive home was lighter somehow. We'd accomplished what we set out to do. Marcus Weber's house of cards was falling down. Think the girls learned their lesson? Vernon asked as we pulled into my driveway. Don't know, don't care, I replied. I'm done trying to save people who don't want to be saved. When we walked into the house, we found Tanya and Marlene exactly where we'd left them. How did it go? Tanya asked nervously. His wife is filing for divorce, I said simply. And she's cooperating with the police investigation. Both women went pale. Police investigation? Marlene whispered. Marcus Weber is a con artist and a bigamist. He's committed multiple felonies, and you two are star witnesses. Tanya stood up quickly. We're not testifying against him. I looked at my wife with complete disgust. Even now, after everything, you're still protecting him. He's the father of my child, Dennis. I won't. He's a criminal, Tanya. And you're an accessory. Vernon was staring at his daughter with disappointment. Tanya, how did you become this person? She didn't answer. She just grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? I called after her. Somewhere I don't have to listen to you judge me. Marlene hurried after her daughter, leaving Vernon and me alone in the wreckage of our families. Think we'll ever see them again? Vernon asked. I shrugged. Honestly, I hope not. 6 months later, I was a different man living a different life. The divorce was finalized, the house was sold, and I'd opened a new butcher shop on the other side of town. Vernon and I had become closer through our shared experience, meeting for coffee every Sunday morning to talk about everything except our ex-wives. Tanya never did testify against Marcus Weber. Neither did Marlene. They both disappeared shortly after our confrontation, leaving town without forwarding addresses. Vernon tried to track down Marlene for a while, but eventually gave up. Some people, he said, don't want to be found. Marcus Weber was arrested 3 months after our Cincinnati trip. Turns out Sandra wasn't the only wife he'd been deceiving. He had active marriages in 2 other states. The FBI got involved when they realized the scope of his operation. He was looking at federal charges for bigamy, fraud, and identity theft. The local newspaper ran a story about it, calling him the heartbreak bigamist. They interviewed me for the article, and I told them exactly what I thought about men who prey on vulnerable women. I also warned other husbands to pay attention to changes in their wives' behavior. My new shop was doing better than the old one. Word had gotten around about what happened, and instead of driving customers away, it seemed to bring them in. Men especially sought me out, wanting to hear the story firsthand and share their own experiences with unfaithful spouses. I hired 2 full-time employees and was considering opening a second location. Turns out getting rid of dead weight, both business and personal, was good for the bottom line. Vernon sold the hardware store and moved to Florida, where he'd reconnected with an old high school girlfriend whose husband had passed away the year before. He seemed happier than I'd seen him in years. You know what the best part is? He told me during our last coffee meeting before he moved. I sleep through the night now. No more lying awake wondering what Marlene was hiding, who she was texting, whether she was telling me the truth. I knew exactly what he meant. Peace of mind was worth more than any marriage built on lies. As for Tanya and Marlene, I heard through the grapevine that they'd moved to Atlanta, where they were trying to raise their children as single mothers. Apparently, Marcus Weber's financial support had dried up once he was arrested. Funny how that worked out. I didn't feel sorry for them. They'd made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. That's how it should be. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, a woman came in just before I locked the door. She was pretty, probably in her early 30s, with honest eyes and calloused hands that suggested she knew how to work. I know you're about to close, she said apologetically, but I was hoping to get some advice about smoking a brisket for my father's birthday. We talked for 20 minutes about meat preparation and smoking techniques. She was intelligent, asked good questions, and laughed at my jokes. When she left with her brisket and my phone number, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. Her name was Rachel, and she turned out to be everything Tanya wasn't: honest, loyal, and genuinely interested in building something real together. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a man is having his old life torn down completely. It makes room for something better to grow in its place.